Welcome back to another episode of the Wild Wisdom Podcast. I'm your host, Alyssa Fennig, and this is your space to learn more about the mind-body connection with strategies to connect to your innate wisdom so you can unleash the powerful, confident woman you're meant to be. Today's episode is sponsored by the Wild Wisdom Book Club. Next up, we're reading The Wild Feminine by Tammy Kent, one of my most favorite books, and we'll gather virtually to practice and discuss. The next series begins soon, so go to alyssafennig.com/book club to learn more and join us for the fun. Friend Shawn Holtel. She's also a certified yoga therapist, and we've worked together on research studies with veterans, chronic pain, PTSD, all kinds of stuff. We've had a great time for that. That's been a couple years ago now.
Yeah, already.
Yeah. So Shawn is going to talk about her love for yoga therapy and Ayurveda and everything with the wisdom of the body, just like I love. She is full of knowledge, and I'm so happy to have her today, or have her here today. All right. Thanks, Shawn, for being on the show.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Good.
I'm happy to see you. It's so good to see you after so long.
It is nice to connect and catch up. I really love that.
Yeah.
And I love when I get to be with guests in person.
Yeah.
But there's just something special about that. It's not always possible for everybody, but definitely. So thanks for making the drive up here.
Yeah. I'm happy to do it. And it kind of brought back memories. It was such a good time being together with the veterans and that whole, I can't believe it was, almost 5 years that I did that. I know you were on it for at least a couple.
It was at least two years.
Yeah.
Probably just two, but yes. Have the results been published yet?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
But it should be soon.
Should be.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a pretty amazing study.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So since that time, I've been, when that completed, I started working with clients privately, more regularly. And, it's been interesting how my practice has evolved. And I know that, you've experienced the same thing.
Sure.
And just the desire people have for moving in a different direction with healthcare and researching things on their own and knowing that there are things that they can do on their own. We're still moving toward that, and there's still a lot of people that don't understand that there's always something that they can do. But a lot of people do. A lot of people are starting to get it. So it's been really fun to start this practice. And I'm in a little town in between Indianapolis and Cincinnati, so there aren't a whole lot of people that know about yoga therapy and Ayurveda. So it's a lot of education on my part, trying to get them to understand what we do, and how there are tools within Ayurveda and yoga that anybody can do, no matter where they are in their health journey, whether they're in bed and they're infirmed, there's still things that they can do.
Oh, definitely.
So it's not all about the putting the leg behind the head, which we always talk about. It's like that really has nothing to do with yoga. Yes.
It's the misconception, right? Because people don't really understand what yoga therapy is. And as a side note for all the listeners out there, where Shawn lives is one of my family's favorite spots for getting fried chicken at Wagner's. So that always brings memories to me, because my grandfather's passed now, but lived in Cincinnati, so we'd always stop and so it's good to share yoga therapy and all of these different holistic practices, and give people an idea that there is something else out there, whatever town you're in. And I think you can be successful in even, if you're in a smaller town, because you'll get the right people in seeking it out, especially because you have a physician partner who refers to you.
Right.
So,
and there's, and doing what we do, what I love about it is no matter what else somebody else is doing, healthcare wise, whatever type of physician they're seeing, whatever they're going through, we can help support what they're doing.
Yeah.
In addition to whatever, they don't ever have to stop any other care that they're doing. It just works in coordination with that.
Yeah.
Which I love.
Yes, that's definitely it. So for all the listeners out there, talk about, because there's some other episodes we've talked about yoga therapy, but, what is yoga therapy for you?
Mm-hmm.
Or, because we're trained differently too as
right.
yoga therapists.
Yes,
and,
absolutely.
And so, so your perspective is going to be totally different. But yeah, of course, there's some similarities. Obviously, we've spent time together, but
yeah.
And then Ayurveda. What is Ayurveda? And then we'll dig deeper into how that all influences, how that can be helpful for lifestyle management and all of that.
Sure. So I actually got into yoga therapy backwards, I think, because I was interested in Ayurveda first.
Oh, okay.
So as my kids were little, I have 2 daughters. They're now 23 and 26. And as they were growing up and they were little and they were, I don't know, probably 10 and 13, I would guess. They started wanting to do things that I just didn't feel was a good thing for them. They wanted to watch movies that I didn't really want them to watch, or they wanted to listen to music that I didn't feel was healthy.
Sure.
And anything that I was reading really wasn't supporting how I was feeling inside.
Mm-hmm.
And one day I read, I can't remember if it was an article in a magazine. At that time, we read magazines. We didn't look at everything on the internet. I can't remember exactly where I saw it, but I read an article on Ayurveda, and it talked about how when we took things in through our senses,
mm-hmm.
Through our eyes, through our ears, through our touch, we had to digest those things. Mm-hmm. It's not only our food that we digest, that we take into our body. Mm-hmm. So that supported what I thought. It's like, oh, if this angry music is coming into my child, she's going to have to process that. Or the scary movie that they want to watch, mm-hmm. they have to process that. Yeah. So it supported my thinking. So I just kept diving a little bit deeper and deeper, and the more that I dove into it and I started to learn, the more questions were answered for me that I didn't really have answers anywhere else within our Western world. Mm-hmm. So with that, I wanted to learn more, and I went to a workshop in Cincinnati at one of the yoga studios. And I wanted to really get an education on Ayurveda. Well, the only program was for yoga teachers. Mm-hmm. So at that point I thought, well, I'll just go to the yoga teacher training and I'll learn more about Ayurveda. So that's kind of how I did it. Sure. And of course then, with that, I was actually practicing yoga asana before that, but I really had no idea the depths of yoga and yoga philosophy. Mm-hmm. So through learning more about the philosophy, again, when you go through a 200-hour training, you learn that there's so much more to learn. Right? You only learn
the drop in the bucket.
Yeah, you only learn that it's one little bitty drop and it's opening up the ocean to you, basically. Yes. Mm-hmm. So I got very interested in yoga, and then through that went on to become very interested in the therapy aspect of yoga. And the more I learned, the more I wanted to learn, and I will probably be in that place for the rest of my life. The more I learn, the more questions are answered for me, and the more it helps me to move through my life even a little bit more gracefully. And I just want to share that with other people, because some of the practices are so simple. Mm-hmm. It's so easy to do, but they can make such a shift that it's just empowering, which is why I called my business Empowered Paths. Mm-hmm. So,
we saw that with the veterans of how simple. We had a protocol that Nancy created, but just how simple these things were that we were teaching them, and how impactful and powerful it was. Yeah. And I mean, the whole veterans community, just most resilient and amazing people on the earth.
Absolutely. And that, I think, solidified what we have learned in our training. They taught me so much. I mean, way more than I ever, than I ever taught them. But to learn how the most subtle practices are usually the most powerful.
Yes.
Because it really helps us to get more into our subtle body and the deeper aspects of what's going on with us.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah. So I'm curious, and maybe you have an answer, maybe it was just the start of your journey, but for your kids when they were 10 and 13 or whatever, and you started learning more about Ayurveda, how did you use some of those principles you learned, even in the beginning when maybe it was just a few, in telling them why they couldn't watch that movie? I mean, I remember watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre at my aunt's house and freaking out. And I remember watching The Exorcist one night at my parents' house, and I could not go to sleep. It was a slumber party I was hosting until my dad woke up to make breakfast. And I grew up in a little 3-bedroom, 1-bath house. I mean, ranch, so it wasn't huge, but I freaked out. Yeah. And so I'm curious, because I'm sure our listeners would be interested in that.
Well, we should probably have my girls in on this conversation too, because I was really pretty strict with it. And kids don't always understand. No. They don't always understand. And when they weren't at home, they did do those things. But then they would realize how they felt. Same way with food.
It reminds me of something I did when my parents weren't at home.
Yeah, but it's okay. It was a learning process for them, and we do laugh about it now because they still are very sensitive to, especially the movies that they watch and what they watch on TV.
And it just got more graphic and violent. 10 years, 20 years later. Yeah.
So it is kind of a joke about how much I tried to keep that from them, those things from them as long as I could. But I would have to say one thing that Ayurveda really helped me with was relationships with other people. Because the more you learn about it, and you learn about how we are each very unique and individualized in our needs, it made me have more compassion for what my kids were going through, or my husband, if they weren't in the same place that I was in, Just for example, like with food, I have a lot of kapha in my system, so I can go a long time without food, and it doesn't really faze me. But, one of my kids, she has a lot of fire in her system, and her metabolism is pretty high, and if she doesn't eat, we're going to hear about it. And I didn't really honor that the way I should have. But learning that, it was like, oh, I get it now. In the same thing with how they carry themselves through school, if they were able to keep their rooms tidy or not, all of that, it gave me a little more permission for them to be who they were. I probably didn't learn these things early enough. As they were growing up, but that's probably the biggest thing that Ayurveda has given me is grace in relationships and more permission for people to be who they are, and not me thinking they should be somebody that they're not.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I love that. That's, what we're discussing, because people tend to think Ayurveda, don't eat this or this, and and I talk about it with my clients a lot with sleep cycles and those sort of things. Absolutely. Which are obviously a part of it, but I love that you're sharing about understanding how people are, and especially when the elemental part, right. And for everyone out there, if you're a little lost, there is an episode with Ellen Leonard, who is also a Ayurvedic health practitioner, who really digs into the doshas. Yeah. So I can't remember what number that is, but I'll link in the show notes. Yeah. So there's just so much to learn. So once you do understand a little bit about that elemental quality, and I won't, Ellen went into that, so we won't go into that specifically. It's still good, yeah. But it really makes you understand how we are all each we're very unique. So that's why just
And Ayurveda means science of life.
Yeah.
So it's a huge, it's a huge topic. But we all, and that's why one diet might work for one person, all the trendy diets that come and go, they might work for one person great, but the next person, it might not work at all. Right. So it kind of, there's answers. Ayurveda gives us answers to things that we may not necessarily have answers to in our Western way of thinking.
I mean, I love it. And it's the sister science of yoga. I don't think we said that.
Right.
But and that's why a lot of people who get into yoga sometimes get introduced to Ayurveda, or in your case it was, flip-flop sort of.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to know and understand, because it does help us with that lifestyle.
Yeah.
And adjusting things, and the understanding of finding grace in relationships. I really love that.
Yeah. And they work so beautifully together. I couldn't imagine doing one without the other now. When I meet with somebody, that is one of the main things that's going on in my head. I'm looking at things through an Ayurvedic lens with whatever's going on with somebody, whether it's anxiety or it's some structural issues that they may have going on with their body. I'm always looking with that Ayurvedic lens.
Yeah.
And it helps to, it gives us a framework for our day. It goes into our food. It helps us with the seasons to move fluidly, because there's a different energy within each one of the seasons. Right now we're in the middle of summer. It's fire season, which we would call Pitta season. Yes. So we want to honor that, because what's going on outside, this past weekend, when I don't know when this will air, but this past weekend we were in the high 90s. So we really needed to honor where we are and pay attention to that.
I agree so much.
Yeah, and there are things that we can do to help counter that. And Ellen may have talked in her episode, what we balance with opposites. If it's super hot, it's as simple as, maybe we want to spend the weekend at a lake in water, rather than in the city walking on hot concrete,
Sure.
So you, once you understand the principles, you can make better choices for yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And let's expand on the summer, because I'll make sure we air this in the summer.
Yeah.
But like Will, when I asked if you wanted I had some cold water with lemons in there, and or had room temperature, which is typically my thing. But it has been. I'm thinking, like, I started laughing because the meme, I don't know if you've seen it, like the different seasons in Indiana, and it was like complete hell or something is where we're at right now. And it was like, yes. And as a pregnant lady, I am feeling this. I have wanted so much icy, cold things. I'm not wanted.
Yeah.
And I ordered a frozen lemonade, which I found out was made with ice cream somewhere. But I was like, I want the slushy, I want the frozen, and I put that in my fridge because I can't get enough of it because I'm so hot.
And normally, this, we, in Ayurveda, we don't recommend drinking anything with ice in it, because it quells the digestive system. But, then there are times where it's okay. I actually had Alyssa give me the cool water instead of the room temp water today.
Because we're in the season of hell.
Yeah, we're in the season of hell. And, when I was in one of my trainings, I went to the Himalayan Institute in Pennsylvania. In the middle of summer, it was really hot. There's no air conditioning. It's more like an ashram setting. Yeah. It was in the high 90s. And our teacher said, all right, I want you guys to go out and have some ice cream now. Yeah. Today, ice cream is your medicine.
Yeah.
So, it's okay, and everything has its place. And,
right.
And that's part of the beauty of it. There is always a way to help to balance.
Yes.
And, and thinking of that, that heat, and it brings up anger, I see headlines with, now why are the violence rates up? And I'm like, I can tell you why the violence rates up. Everybody's hot and angry. Their fire is up, and they're on the edge. And it's the truth. And you know, if we looked at statistics, there are more violent crimes in summer.
Interesting. I wouldn't have thought that, but that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why, because I'm a fiery pitta personality. That's my main dosha quality. I've obviously have kapha, and then I found that my vata goes out of balance, so it can get quite high, and that's why I'm slowing down. But what I found, like hot yoga makes me angry. And because the heat is too much, where it can be great for someone else. Yeah. Especially, I have friends who have a hard time sweating, and that's really helpful for them. Yeah. And so, but for me, I am super irritable. Yeah.
So just like the diets, the food that may be right for one person may not be right for another. Same way with the types of yoga that we do. Yeah. Restorative maybe somebody really needs to move, and they need that more of a vinyasa flow type practice. Yeah. And then vice versa. Some of us need to slow down and and reset, and maybe those restorative type classes are better for those people. Yeah. So
and it's a balance, and feel free to share some examples when we're talking about summer, but of kind of shifting with as things flow. Because it's not going to be 95, 100 or whatever it's been, 90% humidity this week even. It's dropping down. So what are some other aspects or things to do in the summer?
When it is really hot. So food-wise, I mean, just the things that would make sense, think about eating a spicy burrito at noon, maybe
delicious
maybe we would maybe we wouldn't choose to add as much hot sauce on that burrito, and maybe eating things that are a little bit easier to digest, because a lot of times when we are really hot, sometimes that our energy is drawn out away from our digestive system, so it is a little harder to digest things, which seems a little counterintuitive. And if we're going to eat a salad, maybe eat it at noon when our digestive fire is the highest. But don't eat only salads. That's one thing that a lot of people kind of have the misconception of. Eating salads all the time is healthy, and Ayurveda would not necessarily agree with that. We want a varied diet of real whole foods, and knowing that in the summertime, when it's really hot, our energy is going to be drawn out because the energy outside is so intense and so strong. It's going to kind of pull us out of it. So take maybe an extra resting time, maybe before dinner, and maybe an extra little meditation time. Or, if you're a yoga practitioner, maybe do legs up the wall for 10 minutes before you go fix dinner. Take those extra little times to rest throughout the day.
Yeah, I think that's important. I spoke to a Chinese medicine practitioner on another podcast, and similar concepts. One flourished in China, one flourished in India, and they're all very similar. And even I studied Thai massage, Thai medicine, same thing. It's all the Eastern philosophy and just interpreted with different cultures. But that whole the concept of that lazy summer, because it is a restful time, and especially as Americans, we're nonstop,
and we don't adjust to the seasons at all, and and add some of those other elements that help to cool us. Like I said, like the water, be around water, and take a walk in the woods, in the trees.
Is my favorite thing.
Yeah, it's so healing for us, and science is showing that now. Those things that Ayurveda knew thousands of years ago, it's proving out for sure. I don't ever question it anymore. If Ayurveda suggests doing something, I know it's for a reason. Or even adding a little bit of lime to our water. Lime is cooling, and so take your eyes. Eyes are a pitta organ. So cooling the eyes down. So splashing a little bit of cool water in the eyes when we wake up in the morning or before we go to sleep at night. Rinsing the mouth out with cool water helps to clear the pitta out of the body. So we want to try to maintain keeping that heat moving out of the body.
Sure. Otherwise,
when we move into fall, when we come into our vata season, then we can really have some irritations flare up. So we want to keep that heat kind of.
Can you explain that a little bit more?
Well, whatever's happening outside, right? It's the microcosm and the macrocosm.
Okay.
So whatever's happening outside is also happening within us. What's ever happening within us, then we also put out there to the rest of the world. And it grows. If we're angry and we come up to somebody and we're angry and irritated, they're going to feel that. And it's going to rub off on them.
Yeah.
And if it's 95 degrees outside and we go out in it, we're going to get hot. We're going to absorb that. So there are practices that we can do to cool the body, whether it be through our yoga asana practices, cooling the liver down. The liver is also a pitta organ because it's filtering everything that we're taking in, right? So we want to keep those things cool and do those practices and eat the food, the bitter, astringent foods, staying away from salty and sour foods, and maybe even adding a little bit of sweet. Ayurveda also honors the tastes in our mouth. That's something that we don't talk about a lot in the Western world. So we can take in different tastes to facilitate those other parts of us and to calm that pitta down.
Okay, and if we don't, like as we transition into another season in the fall and vata season, what do we see happen? I mean, in general.
So what we see happen is, if we have a lot of heat build up in the body and then we come into fall, think of what the fall season brings for us. Dryness, wind, all those things. And what happens when we put like dry air on a fire? It gets bigger, right? So if we don't have that pitta cleared out of our system the best that we can before fall comes, then that fire is going to get bigger. We're going to have more issues. We're going to end up with possibly skin rashes and a lot of anger issues, irritability, not being able to deal with the people that we are in relationship with. So it's not only our physical body, it's also our mental body and our emotional body that we want to take care of. And Ayurveda recognizes it all as one. It's not separated out.
Yeah, but that's what I love. I mean, yoga therapy is all connected to the Ayurvedic model and the Panchamaya Kosha model and all of that. And I just love that. I think that's a great segue to kind of talk about how Ayurveda influences yoga therapy.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Ayurveda is the medical system in India. It's the indigenous medical system that's been there for thousands of years. And to be quite honest, we don't really know how long because it was an oral tradition before it was ever written down.
Sure.
So it was the complete medical system. It's not here we practice mainly diet and lifestyle, but it's a complete system, including surgery and all kinds of things that we in the Western world kind of feel like we did. But a lot of the model comes from Ayurveda. So through yoga therapy, and as we said, they're sister sciences, they flow alongside of one another. Ayurveda really gives us the tools to stay healthy in this physical body this time around on earth. And yoga, it does that also, but it's focuses a little more on a spiritual path and kind of follows that realm. So it's not really that they're ever in competition with each other, but there may be some things within Ayurveda that we would suggest to keep the physical body healthy that may not be suggested in yoga. For instance, say just eating animals, for instance. If somebody really needs that animal protein within Ayurveda, they would use meat as medicine or bone broth or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a little bit of a different focus at times. But you know, they definitely work hand in hand together.
Well, that makes sense because it's the you know, the practice of ahimsa, non-violence, that people, you know, stay a lot of times. They think it's staying away from animals and becoming vegetarian or vegan, which is everyone's choice. But
to keep the physical body healthy, sometimes we really could benefit from that.
Totally agree.
Protein.
Because I'm a big proponent of that. I was vegetarian for 6 months, and you know, you have to work a lot harder. And I went into a depression. I didn't know the correlation at that point until I studied more nutrition, Ayurveda, all kinds of different things. But I think that's an important concept for people to note, because one diet doesn't fit all.
Right, absolutely.
And it doesn't mean you have to go to the Brazilian steakhouse and get attacked by meat.
No, not at all. No.
Which is what I call it, because it's kind of crazy. But it's just, being conscious, and their nutrition is a huge component, and that's why I like Ayurveda, because it is whole food and thinking of, you know, all the things you need. But, you know, traditionally in India, you're vegetarian and getting most of everything you need from there, but biologically they're used to that. So
they've grown into that for generations, and they do eat animal products. You know, they honor, you know, milk is one of the very holy, ghee, which is clarified butter. So, you know, they do eat the animal products.
Sure.
Which helps to give them some of those nutrients that sometimes are lacking for vegans. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes, and I just think I always like to stop because I think it's important for our listeners to note, because everyone's bombarded every day by, you should eat this or don't eat this or try this diet, and it's like, I think Ayurveda gives you the tools to start to listen to yourself, and yoga too, and go, what do I need?
Yes.
And you know, what do I need, what do I not need? And it's different from the concept of, oh, well, your body will really tell you what you need. Well, if it's out of balance, then that's a whole nother story. But the more you get into balance, because if you're just craving sugar all the time,
you're going to keep craving sugar.
Yeah, exactly. There's a whole nother, we could do a whole nother episode on that. But when you start to get in tune and in balance, then you really know, oh, you know, like, I really need this, because there are days where I'm like, I have not eaten enough protein, and my body's really telling me that. It doesn't have to be animal protein.
Right.
Just
and it doesn't have to be a lot. See, that's another misconception I feel we got caught up here is if a teaspoon is good, then a cup is better.
Yeah.
And that really goes against everything Ayurveda. It's all about the middle path.
Yeah.
Taking the middle path, using only what's needed, no more than that. And paying attention to how you feel.
Yeah.
Really that awareness of paying attention to how this makes me feel.
Yeah, exactly. And because we're so going all the time, that's what gets lost. We don't always know how we feel. And oftentimes when I talk to people, it's like the body has a language. It's pain. It's, you know, but there'll be little whispers at first. Like, that didn't sit well with me, or, you know, or something. And then you ignore it because you're so busy. And then suddenly you've got full-blown this or that, and you're seeking out help because
it's gotten too loud. We weren't in tune enough to listen to those small whispers, which is another reason why I like the yoga therapy part of it, because the practices that we do within yoga therapy really get people to pay attention to what's happening inside of them, which builds their interoception, that sense of what's going on inside of my own body, that things don't have to start yelling. We start paying attention when it's a whisper. Yeah. And we adjust.
Exactly.
Before it's full blown.
Yeah. Well, and I think that is the beauty of yoga and Ayurveda, yoga therapy and Ayurveda, because that's what people need. That's what people need to really change their lifestyles and get healthy is that tuning in part.
Right.
It's not this new prescription or this new diet fad. People think it is. I have a client who, she's like, I gotta get my belly off and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, it's high cortisol. Like, you're constantly stressed. I have that same issue. It's like you're constantly stressed and constantly going. Like, you have to shift that. And then, sometimes people don't know how, but these are all tools.
Yeah, and those are things that we help people with.
Exactly.
How to shift that, and how a breathwork practice could help them lose their belly fat.
Right?
But we have to explain that, because that doesn't make sense if it's not explained.
Yeah, of course.
So explaining why shifting the nervous system into our rest, renew, heal part of our system is beneficial for all systems of the body.
Yeah.
And with our high stimulus world, we've become accustomed to being in low grade fight flight. And even though we've become accustomed to it, our bodies are still in protective mode. And the longer they're in protective mode, it's going to take a little more work to get them to relax. And that's why a lot of the practices that we offer aren't exciting. they're
it's not headstands and arm balances. That's not the yoga therapy work.
No, because we need to get that nervous system to shift for other things to then shift.
Yeah, let's dive into that a little more and explain about the nervous system, because our listeners may not even know those basics of what word that low grade fight or flight. I mean, I know I have been my entire life. I mean, when I really think about it and the things that have happened to me and stuff, and it wasn't until I recognized that, and then I would use tools like yoga, Ayurveda, and all kinds of different things. And I go to different practitioners myself to continue to support my body, my mind. I have daily practices that I do, and I still have to sometimes remind myself, okay, slow down. Like, you're trying to do too much still, because that's how I'm wired.
Yeah.
So I've had to rewire myself.
Right. And it's not that can't be done, but you have to consciously,
right?
You have to very consciously do it.
Yeah. So let's talk about the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, especially, and whatever you want to share.
Yeah. So that is one of the main pieces that I do when I consult with people, is educate them on the autonomic nervous system. And there's a lot out there on the internet. People can research on their own, learn about that system of the body. There are two branches of that autonomic system, and most people have heard about the fight-flight system. And then there's the rest, renew, heal part of our system. And it's like we should flow fluidly between those two systems, and we should be in that rest, renew, heal part of our system most of the time. And if something happens that we need some ramping up, say we're getting ready to give a speech, or something else that we really need to work ourselves up for, that fight flight system will kick in. It'll give us the adrenaline that we need to get those jobs done. A lot of times the fight flight system is made out to be the bad guy, and it's not really the bad guy. It's really a brilliantly designed system of the body. But again, with the way our system is, our culture is, we're constantly being bombarded. It can be our cell phone going off that triggers that fight flight system, or whatever. Nothing really life threatening, but our body's responding like those triggers are life threatening. So with that, there's a whole domino effect of things that are happening in the body. Adrenaline's being released. If adrenaline is released for too long, then cortisol is going to be released. It's all a self-preservation mode for the body. So understanding that system of the body actually gives you some sympathy for what's happening. It's like, my body is trying to protect itself. So once we understand that, and knowing that autonomic system is what makes our heart beat, it's what digests our food. It's what makes us breathe. All those things that are happening in the background of our body. That's what's making that happen. The one thing that we can manipulate within that system is our breath. So by breathing in very specific ways, we can send messages to the body that it is safe, and it can shift into that rest, renew, heal part of our system. So I wouldn't say it's we're tricking the body, but we're informing the body that it is not in danger, and it can let its guard down, and you can digest your food. You can actually digest your food. You can go to sleep. You know, if you're in low grade fight flight, you're not going to be able to sleep. No.
Yeah, I have clients like that.
So there's so many things that are, if our bodies are on guard because it thinks it's in danger, are just going to stop happening, because they're not going to need to happen right now if we need to protect ourselves. So once the body's in that rest, renew, heal part of our system, then like I said, other healing is able to happen in the body. Like I said, we're able to digest our food properly, and the nutrients are going to work. They're going to be broken down in a way that we're able to use them. We're going to be able to sleep, which then offers other healing to happen. So and our sex hormones are going to be released. We're going to release oxytocin, which makes us happy and loving and grateful. So I can't stress enough how important it is to be in that part of our nervous system most of the time. And most of us need retrained to be in that part of our system.
I would say that's the core of yoga therapy. I mean, obviously there's...
It's the beginning. Yeah. It's like the first step, I feel.
Yep. And, the core of what I do with people, because they come in a constant state of fight or flight. And I think it's so important for people to understand that and realize, whether it's intellectually understand I'm doing these tools or using these tools of breathing and meditation and asana movement, or to affect my nervous system, because sometimes depending who you are, you need that intellectual.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm that way. If I don't understand why I'm doing something, I'm going to be much less apt to do it. If I understand the reasoning behind it, then it's like, oh, well, that makes sense. So if I lay here and breathe in this manner for 10 minutes, it's going to help all these other things. So if I know that, and I know this really very gentle, easy practice is benefiting me in that way, great, then it wasn't hard, and that's another thing. And we've been trained that if it's not hard and if it's not somewhat painful, then it's not working. So
that's true.
Yeah,
we've got to retrain that.
Or if it's not quote unquote exercise, then it's not benefiting the body. And this type of work is working on ourselves. One of my teacher calls it inner size. We're working on our inner self. It's a different type of work.
Yeah, and I think it's essential. And as we talked before, that's one of the reasons I have this podcast. And when we talk about all kinds of different holistic medicine, mind body modalities, but we always come back to yoga therapy because I'm a yoga therapist. So and that's kind of core. So but I think it's important to share and for people to know about all of this, because yoga therapy is something that, yes, you may need to go to someone to help guide you at first and work with you and teach you, but it's something you can do for the rest of your life.
Absolutely. It's we're educating people on how to take care of themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's it, and it's not something that needs to happen forever. Within 2, 3, 4 sessions, a lot of times you can have a very large toolbox of resources that you can pull from once you know what you need.
Yes, and when you need them, because the toolbox analogy is what I always use, because that's how I function as well. Like, I might have a day where I just feel a little more amped up. So I need some practices that are going to help me balance and chill. But I also might have a day where I'm tired and need some energy. And that's kind of a simplistic version. But You know, if I'm not going to sleep at night for some reason, what's going on in my mind? You know, I started to look at that. I might do a yoga nidra for sleep to help me balance my body and calm down. I luckily don't have issues with that very much so.
A lot of people do though. So many people have issues with sleep, which could be another whole
it can. Podcast. Maybe we should do that because I teach about that all the time, and the core issues with sleep and how, because you know, I love to be like, well, I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm like, oh, when? Between 3 and 5? And they're like, how'd you know? And it's like, well, there's correlation there. And there's correlations to other time periods too. But it's just kind of funny, like, really? I was like, is it worse in the fall? You know?
Exactly.
And that sort of thing.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of Ayurveda. It gives us all of those answers and gives us some things to balance that, to counter those feelings and those things that are happening as the seasons change, as things are happening in our life, which is going to, that's life.
Yep.
You know, stuff's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a great point because stuff does happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Things change. Your routine changes. We were talking about, you know, before when I got pregnant and like I had to eat right away. So my, you know, regular practices kind of I had to reconfigure my routine. Because it, you know, kept changing for a little while there. Yeah. And so people, the more you tune in, you start to adapt.
Realize that. And you know, and even if you do have a really nice stable routine and you go on vacation for a week or two and all that falls away, rather than beat yourself up about it, just pay attention. Yeah. And think of that falling off the wagon, I like to call it, period, as a time to observe how you feel, what are you missing? And then when you come back to it, notice how that feels. So a lot of what we do in yoga therapy is getting people to notice and getting people to pay attention.
Exactly.
To how they respond to things and how they're receiving things.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think it's essential. Yeah. Is there any final thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners?
Oh gosh, learn your autonomic nervous system. That would be a biggie.
Any recommendation on how to get started with Ayurveda?
I would find a practitioner, and there is also a lot of information online about that too, but honestly it can become a little confusing. Yeah. It can become a lot.
Agreed.
I really like Banyan Botanical's website. Yes. They're a company that I really trust, and I get all my resources from them, and I actually refer clients to a lot of their articles. So that is a great resource.
Yeah, completely agree. And I'll link to that because they have where you can do your profile and start to give you some initial things. But I do agree and want to tell everybody, if you really want to dive deeper into using this for yourself, find an educator.
Yeah, find an Ayurvedic health counselor or a practitioner in your area. And NAMA, the National Ayurvedic Medical Association, they have a list of those health counselors and practitioners all around the world. Yeah. So that's a good resource too. I can give you that resource.
Yep. And just like finding a yoga therapist, a certified yoga therapist with the International Association of Yoga Therapists. Because I find myself, and I'm sure you do too, educating people every day about what is yoga therapy, what makes a certified yoga therapist, a C-IAYT, versus just yoga teachers taking a 200-hour. That's obviously the start in the beginning, but there is a huge difference in education and philosophy.
Yeah. It's just it's the way that we work with individuals, and we see, or small groups of people that may have the same condition, but we look at things through a different lens than a yoga teacher does. Their motivation is to teach a group of people a structured class that they've designed, which is all beneficial too. Yeah. But it's looking at an individual through that lens of a therapeutic lens.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's our mission in life, to teach people about that. And, I know it's certainly mine, and I know you have
mine
some
too.
of that as well. So, well, thank you, Shawn, for being on the show. We'll definitely link to everything in our show notes, and I appreciate sharing all your knowledge on Ayurveda and yoga therapy. And we'll have to do another episode on somatics, because I know you have a ton of knowledge on somatics as well.
Yeah,
so
great.
Thank you for coming up. And now, the best part about having people here is that now we can go to dinner and keep talking. So enjoy, everyone. Hope you enjoyed the show.
Thanks, Alyssa.
So I want to hear from all of you out there. What did you think of today's topic and conversation? Did you love it? So find me on Instagram or Facebook under Alyssa Finnig and direct message me. Or better yet, join the Wild Wisdom Collective group on Facebook. It's a free group. Chime in on the discussion, and you can just search in groups. You'll find us on there. And I look forward to hearing your thoughts and insight about today's discussion, and also what else you'd love to hear about. And if you do love what you're hearing, take a moment on your smartphone, click the button to subscribe, and write us a review so that we can continue sharing this with more and more women out there. See you next week at the same time with another incredible guest. Wild blessings.